Well, hello everybody and welcome to another video. Big news today. So last week, I can't believe it's been a week already, the final release for Secrets of the Obscure came out. I have played through it now. I know some of you guys immediately have been asking for the story playthrough, which is actually still technically in the release before. That will be going ahead. In fact, today I sat down, I was literally about to start the streams for continuing that story while I've played it privately, and I do know the ending, and yes, as many of you have speculated, I'm pretty disappointed in how that story went. I guess we'll talk about that more as we go along. So I sit down today thinking, okay, let's kick that up, and boom, of course, it's a week later. Now, what did ArenaNet promise? If you saw in my last video, they said they'd do a retrospective post about how Secrets of the Obscure has gone. Their new expansion format, yearly Expacs. I think just to say very briefly, I think this one had a fairly strong release. Not an amazing release, but a fairly strong release, and then very poor patches that came out afterwards. It wasn't obvious on the first release, but the second two really have been a bit of a whiff for me. Though there have been some redeeming elements in terms of features, in terms of what they've done for the end game and stuff. So that's kind of my general take on Secrets of the Obscure. I'm definitely looking for the next one to do much better, a bit better at launch. I'd like to see more with the features, but specifically how they handle those Living World-esque releases that follow up. I really want to see some dramatic change. So ArenaNet said they do this retrospective where they look back at what they accomplished this year, whether they hit their goals. And I think this is a really important post because hopefully if they basically say, if they lay it all out on the line and they say, look, this wasn't very good here, here, and here, that would give me more hope and motivation for the next mini Expac. So let's see what they say. Now, there are some good juicy teasers here. We obviously already had one teaser for the next expansion. I guess press will be spinning up for that very soon. In fact, I think they said next week they're going to do that. Secrets of the Obscure, they had a very rapid announcement into launch. Seems like it'll probably be a bit longer this time. So, hey Guild Wars community, Josh Davis here, the game director for Guild Wars 2. Last week's content update was a significant milestone for us, both technically and symbolically, because it marked the final major release for Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure, our first foray into the annual expansion model, first announced in early 2023. As we conclude one chapter, sorry guys about my voice, I've still got a hell of a cough from after my fever is broken, but I've got this persistent cough. As we conclude one chapter with the final content update of Secrets of the Obscure, we are eagerly preparing to unveil the details of our next expansion. Before we get all swept up by next week's news, so next week they'll start talking about it, of what's coming for Guild Wars 2, I want to take a moment to reflect on the development of Secrets of the Obscure and some of the high-level learnings that we've taken forward with us into our 5th expansion. You won't learn about the specific features, setting, or story of our next expansion in this blog post, that's for next week, but you'll have a better understanding of how we're approaching its development. We kind of will be learning about the setting, and there are some good speculations about the story. As bad as I think that the Secrets of the Obscure story's been, at least this final release had some nice teasers and hints about Krycia and the Eye of Janthir and stuff, which looks somewhat Krycia-centric, Isles of Janthir-centric. You know, the Eye of Janthir actually appeared in the final story instance. Anyway, so similar to how it did at the end of Season 3, I suppose, leading into POF. But so, we'll have a better understanding of how they're approaching its development. So let's see. A quick history refresher. A little over a year and a half ago, we announced we'd be transitioning from long-standing Living World model to smaller but more frequent annual expansion releases. It's a significant shift, but the new direction was born out of an examination of the pain points experienced by our players and devs. The reasons we laid out for this change and what we hoped to achieve by it were simple but deeply important. They got the big three. They wanted to deliver content updates in a more consistent and timely manner. And I think you can look at Secrets of the Obscure and say, yes, they did do that. Whether each update hit your bar of quality is another story, but they did hit their schedules and their timeline. And you know, all year there has been something going on. Provide better support for the systems and game modes that make up the Guild Wars 2 experience. I'm not sure whether they really hit this. And finally, to enable ArenaNet employees to enjoy a better work-life balance. So obviously this one's really nice and is really good and decent. You want to think that the studios you're supporting do this for their devs. For me making this video, for you watching this video, for those of us outside the studio, we don't know what the crunch was really like for them with POF and Season 4, you know, when the game was, in my opinion, at its height. We don't know what the crunch was like during EOD. We don't really know how bad their work-life balance has been, how good it is now. Hopefully that's all decent. This is kind of a weird one to include in a blog post like this because, you know, for us, the consumers reading this, it's nice and everything, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of an irrelevance. As far as the players are concerned, they're going to spend X amount of money a year and they want a certain bar of quality. And this doesn't actually mean anything from a consumer standpoint, but obviously is nice and hopefully is something they've been able to hit. So they say, now that we've completed a full expansion release cycle, I can confidently say we've made significant strides towards these goals. But as with all things, there's room for improvement, both in terms of the content we deliver and the process through which we deliver it. For today, I'm going to focus on some of what we've learned through the content side of things. And so they picked this Paper concept art here, which is really great art and kind of shows the two sides of her, I guess, that the story was hinting at, but never really went anywhere with. Anyway, don't let me rant about the story here. So, the conclusion of the Elder Dragon saga in End of Dragons presented us with a unique opportunity to delve into a different kind of storytelling. I.e., you don't have to do world-ending threats all the time. You don't have to keep chasing power scales. You don't have to supersede the gods and then the dragons and so on. You can do a different kind of story, a smaller stake story. They say we aimed to focus on deeper narratives grounded in characters and circumstances around the player character. Did they? However, with Secrets of the Obscure, our ambition led us to take on a broader scope than was feasible. I.e., they did a big war story again. This was a lesson learned, in my opinion, in Season 3, when they tried to squeeze the Crichton Civil War into Season 3. It was too much already. You know, even the Heart of Thorns scope was too big for what Heart of Thorns itself was. The Crichton Civil War was crowbarred into there. A lot of the Awakened stuff and Palawa Joko conflicts, I think, kind of didn't fit into Season 4. Season 4 had to be, like, either Krauk or the Palawa stuff. Anyway, this is a lesson I think that they could have learned 1,000 times over. Another good example here in editing is, you know, putting the Char Civil War and all of that into the Icebreed Saga. But they made the mistake here again with Secrets of the Obscure. And I'm a bit disappointed in this blog post. This is all they say. It had a broader scope than was feasible. I mean, come on, spell it out for us. We introduced a lot of new characters. The plot was too complex for what can be reasonably handled within an annual expansion. This left some character interactions feeling rushed and story threads unexplored. More isn't always better. I'm going to be careful here not to just rant about the story. The story isn't really that complex. It sort of gave the illusion that more was happening, that there was ethical considerations and moral greyness and, you know, uneasy alliances. It implied all of these things were happening and could happen, but actually none of it did. So I don't know if this is the correct assessment, that the Secrets of the Obscure story was too complex. It was just too large. It was too big of an idea for too little screen time, you know? This left some character interactions feeling rushed, story threads unexplored, more isn't always better. I do like the sentence, more isn't always better. But yeah, certainly huge amounts of it felt rushed and huge amounts was unexplored. And yeah, we did have too many characters. I think one of the biggest issues with Secrets of the Obscure is the post patches. Is really we should have stayed with the exact same cast. Should have been Isgarin and Urchik and all those guys that we'd met in the main expansion. They should have been the characters as we went forwards. Instead, we got the whole new demon cast, essentially, and that didn't really work. We learned a lot from this experience. Even Paether, right? Paether is kind of a character in the main story, but is a different sort of character in the later patches. Anyway, we learned a lot from this experience. We have a much greater understanding of story scale within our new release structure. Now, I want to believe this, I really do. I don't know why it's Secrets of the Obscure that has given them this greater understanding of story scale than what they could have gleaned from Season 3 or all those other examples I gave earlier. But hey, let's take it at face value. So for our next expansion, we're going to tell a more grounded story set in a new region of Tyria. This I'm very happy with, a new region of Tyria. Because again, I think this whole, like, the expansion itself being in the sky, basically, so it doesn't even really feel like a part of Tyria, and then we're in another dimension, doesn't really feel like a part of Tyria. That kind of really ruins the adventuring aspect of it for me. So actually being somewhere in Tyria, somewhere local, somewhere on the ground, going on a new adventure, that's really important to me. So very happy with this. A grounded story doesn't necessarily, I mean, what I want to hear is a smaller scale story. With more of a focus on local threats, I guess that's what they're saying, and the global conversation around those threats. Now, this is the tricky bit, and this could be quite cool if they do it well. So we're looking at kind of a small story, but we feel it reverberating on a larger level. I guess what's implicitly happening with this blog post, by the way, guys, what they're sort of tap dancing around, is if all that Guild Wars 2 is going to do from now into the future is small expansions on a yearly scale with smaller scopes, You're never going to get anything big and grand and epic ever again, you know, like the Elder Dragon scale. So if that's what you were playing Guild Wars for Elder Dragon scale long-term storylines, you know, look elsewhere. And that's what they're trying to not, you know, call attention to, I guess. Obviously, it's tricky because 99% of this is just in the presentation. They can do a small scope, grounded, local story with an epic boss fight just because the boss is presented really well and has great animations and visuals and stuff. So you can still get big feeling stuff. It's just about the implementation. I think it's totally wrong to suggest, oh, the only worthwhile stories are ones that take 15 years to finish, i.e. the Elder Dragons thing. They can do something good in a short space of time. It just needs to be the right scale and have the resources it needs. Tyria, despite all its challenges, has continued to stir. While we leave Naos and the Cryptis to enjoy their newfound freedom, the story will pick up on some threads started in Secrets of the Obscure, continuing the Astral World arc, their moral ambiguity, and their relationship to Tyria. I think this is really good as well. Look, I get it, each mini Expac kind of needs to be self-contained, but I don't think that means you need to rip everything away and you have to do everything new. In particular, I think anything introduced domestically with the 5 major races, the original characters like Ritlock and Logan, characters that new players will meet in the personal story, those characters can all be reused in these mini Expacs. And they did that with Secrets of the Obscure with Zodja, but then she was kind of off screen a lot, and then they changed her personality by having her ascend and all that kind of stuff. So, but I think they're all really ripe for the picking, and so here they're going to be reusing Secrets of the Obscure characters, which I feel like is kind of the same trap. Isn't that now asking people who really want to get the most out of this second mini Expac to have played Secrets of the Obscure, which is kind of a weak mini Expac and is not going to go down too fondly, I think, in most people's memory. So I don't know about that, but the idea of continuing some arcs forwards, that these mini stories are at least drawing from one another, I think that's important. Whether they'll ever be able to build to something large scale again, I don't know. But yeah, so there you go. Then we get the concept art of some of our new characters standing around the table. So then they go on to say, and look, I got a lot to talk about the story, I really do, and I'd love to read in the comments if you guys want to flesh out some of your thoughts and drop them down. I will be reading and responding, but mostly we'll talk about this in the Secrets of the Obscure streams as we go forwards. Now, map design. So in Secrets of the Obscure, we delivered 3 new open world maps. The first 2, Amnatas and Skywatch, I'll skip Archipelago. Came with the expansions launch in August 2023. The third map in Naos released with the first quarterly update, and then expanded in the second and third quarterly updates with new playable space and events. So they expanded it twice, basically. Each patch brought more of the map out. So here's what they say. After extensive adventuring in Inner Naos in the recent months, it's clear that using a single map as the main focal point for 3 releases, i.e. the majority of the year. Because remember, when the expansion comes out, yeah, you get 2 maps, but you play them all. The way we experience it as, you know, MMO gamers is you're basically going to binge the game for a couple of weeks, and you're going to experience all of that all at once. So then you do basically have all year just on these other little expansions. It's not ideal, they say, to do it this way from a player or a dev standpoint. Our decision to do so originally stemmed from production constraints and overlapping dev timelines between Expacs, but we've identified some ways to mitigate these issues, both in terms of release structure and process improvements. And we don't know what any of that means. It's kind of a nothing comment. It's just a trust me bro kind of comment there, really. But I sort of do, because I do think, as in, I do trust them, bro. The first mini Expac was always going to be a bit rocky because it's the first one that they've done. There will be things that they learn, obviously. There will be efficiencies and optimizations. That's why I've always said I'll give them at least 2, you know. If the next one hasn't built or improved on the first, then I'm going to be, you know, pretty miffed and pretty upset with that. But I have always thought, you know, the first mini Expac will be a little bit rough around the edges, and I've always said I'll give them those 2. So I do believe that there'll be process improvements and whatever. And look, I know that sounds like a bit of a cop-out excuse. There's this thing with Guild Wars where it's like, it'll always be better in the future. Next time. I know it 100% falls into that trap. But it's still a fact. I'll make the statement anyway, and for me, I've always said I'll give them 2. So here's their new idea. They say for the next Expac, the first 2 maps are going to come at launch, just like with Secrets of the Obscure, but the third map is going to come in the second update and be expanded in the third, meaning it will be just like Bureau Marches. It's one release and then the other half of a release, or the Drizzlewood Coast. So it's how the Icebrood Saga did it. Basically, the map comes in 2 releases. What that means, and again, they're doing a bit of a tap dance here, what they're telling you guys is the first update after this new mini Expac comes out won't even have a map. There's no map anymore for the first update. And so the game then is, how do they make that update look really big and impressive and exciting? So here's how they justify it. Or they say, what this will do is give our team a bit more time to develop the third map. This kind of suggests they had all of Inaneos done, really. Even with good chunks of the expanded areas, maybe. Right on the first release. They say it means that the story during the next expansion cycle will better leverage all 3 maps and take you back to familiar areas from your past adventures. While the first quarterly release after the expansion's launch won't include the 3rd open world map yet, as it did with Secrets of the Obscure, they say there will be plenty of new content to keep you busy in that time frame. In terms of story, open world content and encounters, I know that's a little vague. Again, check back next week. But rest assured, the first quarterly release will include something really exciting that players have been requesting for over 5 years. Okay, so there's kind of a whole new conversation here with the 5 years thing. So I just want to say, I do think this sounds good. Because a big problem, even when we scroll up here and we talk about the story stuff, with Secrets of the Obscure's post-release story, is it was all centered in Inaneos. All the characters were around the Inaneos. You know, you had some people dip in every now and then. But it was far too self-contained. I definitely believe in a format of, I'll just call it Living World, right? These post-updates. I think they should be taking us back to the regular expansion maps. They should be utilizing the same characters, the same areas, not exclusively. I do always want somewhere new to go. But going back to previous places means you can have a more cohesive story and you can actually get a bit more richness and depth out of the previous stuff. I think it's really bad the way that Secrets of the Obscure is structured, that I never went back to Skywatch or Amnitas unless it was for, you know, artificial stuff like going for metas and achievements and things like that. I think the story should loop you back. And not just to the previous expansion map areas, by the way. The whole game. Courtier areas too. I think one of the reasons why Season 3 was so good was because when you look at, I don't know, say the final patch, I know it was a controversial patch in a lot of ways. You know, when we were joining the Shining Blade and stuff, we had like a little expansion to Brisbane Wildlands, and we had a reason to go back to Divinity's Reach. Integrating and filtering content all over the game, reusing everywhere. That's just, that should be baseline what they're doing, and I think that the fact Secrets of the Obscure didn't do any of that was a real shame and a real downer. So yes, I think that patch 1 can be fine. I would like some little areas, like mini dungeons, small areas. Again, I use that Season 3 example because I think, you know, the extra Shining Blade headquarters beneath Divinity's Reach was a nice, fun little expansion. You know, the little area that we very first met, Kerida/Livia, north of Brisbane, that was also kind of cool. I think little areas like that getting dotted around will do a lot. And yes, they can definitely do a Living World-esque release that doesn't have a new map. They can definitely do that. I still remember in Season 2, where, again, we had a bunch of releases that didn't technically have new maps. But I remember, sorry, at the start of Season 3, they gave us Ember Bay. And when they gave us Ember Bay, they specifically said, hey, it's not necessarily true you'll always get a map, but we're doing it this time. And then they just fell into that rhythm for all of Season 3 and all of Season 4. And I don't think it's necessary. They just need to bring content, and that can be in the style of more conversations, more character interactions. Not only does that give us more reason to go to earlier areas, but it makes the story better as well, because the whole problem with Guild Wars 2 story always is it's too small, too thin, too narrow. And I want more screen time for these characters. So yeah, I think it's fine. I do believe in this first release without a map. And then by shunting the new map, the third map, off, you know, maybe that paces the excitement out a bit better. I think it's a good idea. Okay, so with all of that said, they say that's a little vague, but the first release will also have something that people have been requesting for over 5 years. So over in my Ceres LM like Spud Discord you know, chat group, just before I recorded this, someone said, hey, this could be a hint about a new raid. Believe it or not, this is mind-blowing here. We're in 2024, right? I cannot believe this was half a decade ago. I cannot believe what I'm about to say. The last raid, the Key of Adashim, that was 2019. That was half a decade ago. 5 years ago. So, you know, this could obviously... Players have been requesting a lot of things for many, many, many years. But when so like someone in that chat mentioned, oh, a New World versus World map, just to pull an example out of a hat. But the thing is, people have been requesting New World versus World maps for well over 5 years. People have been requesting, you know, a return to dungeons for well over 5 years. They picked 5 years here. So what stopped 5 years ago? Well, that was the last raid release. So I think that's a cool idea. Maybe there are other things that stopped exactly 5 years ago and you guys can point to and talk about in the comments. But or maybe I'm just digging into the 5 years thing a little bit too much. But I think that is quite exciting, and that's exactly the kind of thing, yes, that could really substantiate a patch that doesn't have a new open world map. I mean, what's always great about raids, and I've always had a lot of fun with, is that they kind of are new areas to explore. They are expansions to the world. They're out there. They're places to go to. I actually find my first travel and experience through those linear raid wings more fun than exploring open world maps. Like, I loved going through, you know, the Bastion the Penitent, obviously, but like my first exploration of the Underworld or the Spirit Vale or anywhere in the first trinity of releases, they're all really good. They are new adventures to me and worthwhile substitutes for a map in one patch. I know there's this other conversation where some proportion of you guys listening to me right now will think, oh, but I'm not a hardcore player, so I would never do the raids. You gotta remember though, they're very good with like the CMs and the LM idea. You know, the first base experience through this stuff is fairly casual leaning. I think that there's a wide range of people who genuinely will be able to experience this and get some good quality out of the release. Before we move on, because now they're going to go to talk about features, I do want to say as well, when they opened this and they were talking about, you know, map design, they didn't really talk about map design here. They just talked about how they're going to pace and release the map. I do find, I'm not sure how many of you guys feel the same, but as I played through Secrets of the Obscure, I want to see ArenaNet do more interesting things with the kind of content we find in the open world these days. You know, I've had my fill of metas and all the different ways they can reconfigure, you know, what a meta event is, or regular random dynamic events running around zerging. You know, I feel like the Secrets of the Obscure open world maps were not that captivating to me. I kind of want to see them innovate a bit more. I don't know whether it's something about map design now that everyone has sky scales and all the mounts and just the way that the exploration and stuff moves, but I would have loved some commentary on that, how they're continuing to develop and change and tweak things on that level. You know, maybe in terms of assets and the kind of environments we go to. We're actually going to have a teaser trailer in a second, by the way. And when I first watched the teaser trailer at the bottom of this post, I just thought, oh, that's Harathi Hinterlands. Only to realize, oh no, that's actually a teaser of the new map. Little things like that I would have loved retrospective commentary on. But I guess the truth is that they're not really going to be changing any of that, so hey. But yeah, so there you go. That's open world. That's their retrospective there. Now we move to features. And this is another big topic. Secrets of the Obscure, you know, has drawn a bit of criticism for selling old features, you know, in terms of the sky scale. Or it did the Wizard's Vault, which... is that really a sellable feature for the expansion? It's a really important thing. Having really good, strong dailies and weekly or you know, seasonal long objectives, having things, you know, improving the old daily system was one of the highest priorities for me and one of the things that I really, really thought the game needed. Now, whether they did the Wizard's Vault perfectly and all that is another conversation. But was it really a feature that the expansion had, or was it just something the game needed, right? What did Secrets of the Obscure actually have in terms of like fun new toys for us to play with? Like POF adding mounts, like Heart of Thorns introducing the idea of masteries, or elite specs, which obviously went away. You know, we had the new weapons, that was about it. So for the next mini Expac, this is definitely something I'd like to see what they do. Now here's what they say. MMOs are made up of numerous gameplay systems and content types, each with a different role to play in the game experience. As games go on, they tend to accumulate more and more systems and features from expansions and the like, which is fine if there's effort to put into maintaining and updating those systems, or if they're properly siloed. That's another thing. You can be very clear to someone, to the users. Dragon response missions are just for the Icebreed Saga in this particular story. Don't expect them forever. But if you don't properly communicate or place things, if you don't correctly silo stuff, then you're going to get people in 2024 still asking for DRMs and the like, right? Which is just silly, but, you know, that really comes down to how they've implemented it. Anyway, they don't really talk about that. They say, looking back over the game's history, I think this maintenance and upkeep is one of the areas we've fallen short. At times, even falling into the trap of releasing new features for the sake of releasing new features, even if they overlap with something that already exists. This is something we've been referring to internally as putting a hat on a hat. Now, that's all great and that's all very smart, but it does make me smile to read that after thinking about the Wizard's Vault. Which, you know, they removed the old daily system so that it wasn't putting a hat on a hat. But if you look at a lot of the designs inherent to the way they did the Wizard's Vault, they are the exact same designs that were there in the daily system and kind of made it a bit of a wash, you know. Anyway, over the last 2 years, we've put much more of a focus on upkeep and iteration of systems and avoiding unnecessary bloat where possible. We put more of a focus on maintaining live game systems, and with Secrets of the Obscure, we even went to the extent of entirely reworking existing features to make room for more modernized solutions. So what exactly are they talking about here? Not sure. In editing, I'm thinking about like maybe the fact that Secrets of the Obscure continue to support End of Dragons fishing. Maybe when we talk about raids, you know, they had raids, and then in Iceberg Saga they did strikes. Was that putting a hat on a hat? They could have just stayed with the raid format, but tweaked it to be, you know, one encounter each or something. Yeah, with Secrets of the Obscure, they just stuck with strikes. Is that the kind of thing they mean? You can expect to see a new system being introduced in Expac 5 that adds meaningful way to spend your time in Guild Wars 2, while using this as an opportunity to greatly improve the player experience with related existing game systems. This is too corporate. This is too vague, this. I mean, what are they talking about? Are they trying to, let's use the phrase again, tap dance? Are they trying to avoid explaining something's going to get removed? The Wizard's Vault had the original daily system removed. Somewhat controversial if you didn't like the Vault compared to the original one. Are they basically saying we're going to chop something else out and refine it and give you something new? And in which case, what could it be that they're talking about here? Something about currency, something about map rewards? I'm not sure. Overall, we're a bit conservative with features in Secrets of the Obscure. It's as close as they get to candor about the fact that Secrets of the Obscure didn't really have enough. We were a bit conservative. Trying to strike the right balance between scope, schedule, and risk while navigating a new content structure. We've ironed out a lot of the kinks here. It's allowed us to be a bit more ambitious with our next expansion. Next week can't come soon enough. So yeah, this is one of those things. I guess we'll see next week what they're doing. But the teaser below, guys, does give us a bit of something, which I am very excited about. Speaking of which, so let's finish this up, I guess. Such a tease. We close out a recent blog with the previous screenshot, which I talked about in that video. We thought today would be a fun opportunity to build on that teaser, so I'll leave you with an additional environment preview. So here is their teaser. It's probably about 20 seconds long here, guys. So, oh, by the way, it's called There's Something Leaving the Water, which is interesting as a name for the teaser. Obviously, it's referencing the whole Tequatl spawning dialogue. There's something in the water. Does that just Tequatl though? And does the Hylic, does Sparkfly Swamp? Does any of this have anything to do with the story, or are they just doing that for fun? I don't know. Anyway, here's the teaser. And immediately I thought, oh, this just looks like Harathi, you know. And I think based on the Secrets of the Obscure teaser stuff in the final patch that came out last week, we're all kind of expecting something Crichton adjacent, right? There we go. So we get some fish, we get a guy swimming. Now, kind of the biggest reveal here happens almost offhandedly. So this is a guy swimming. I think that's all normal armor. You guys into Fashion Wars will have to tell me. But he's wielding a spear, right? So that's fine. Spears are underwater gear in this game, and he's underwater. But so here now you see swimming at the surface, and as he comes out, and they actually cut the bit where he leaves, he's come out now, and his weapon is still there. Now, maybe there's a thing where you can have it, because there's all kinds of weird bugs where you can toggle equipment states and stuff in this game, where you can get out and you can still have your underwater weapon visible, but there's no way you could ever unsheath it. But here, he walks forwards, and he unsheaths. So, you know, I think when I first watched this, I was mostly just looking at the environments, and doesn't this looks just like near where the Vigil Keep is, right? So this whole time I thought we were in Crichton, but then we reverse, and we see this big rainbow, and you realise, oh, what they're doing, like the Grothmar thing, where they put rainbows and bump the saturation in an attempt to make it look alien and different, even though a lot of these are the same assets we've seen before. But here, check it out. He's unsheathed, and he's wielding the spear. So, yeah, it looks like underwater weapons on land. It looks like we're finally getting... Now, this has been something on my list of things I've wanted for years. If I was thinking of mini Expacs, and I was thinking of, okay, what are some worthwhile features to have? New weapons, fine. Secrets of the Obscure had them, but they were the same set, the same pool, again, over and over. I want to see new stuff. I want to see stuff like whips and great axes and totally new things. Now, in the ambition of that, the very first thing they could do, the very least they could do, because at least there's a bunch of skins and stuff, is have us get the underwater weapons on land. Let us use tridents above the water. Let us use spears. Guild Wars 1 had spears, you know, as a ranged weapon. And here it is! And oh my god, this is actually huge, if this is what it is. I guess they'll reveal more next week, but wow. So I'm dead excited about that. I think that's absolutely fantastic. People in the Spud Discord were joking that, It'd be very on brand for this to just be a staff skin, you know. But I don't think Arena would be doing that. The holding animation seems very similar to what we already have in the game. You know, I would have loved it if it was like slugged over his shoulder or something, really signifying this was something very new. But there you go. So, and it looks very still, like it's not animated at all. So this could be actually quite work in progress here. So yeah, that probably is this new feature thing that's being alluded to. And yeah, very excited. And then obviously we got the map, which, you know, I'm going to really need to know a bit more about the story, and I'm going to have to be seated in the game to know how really excited I am about this here. But it looks located close to Crater. I'm guessing this is probably around the Delta, as I talked about in that previous video. It looks like this is going to be a big Janthea thing. Now, if you remember the Woodland Cascades, you have the Bastion and the Penitent down there, probably lots more interesting ancient ruins and things. And as we move up, speaking of new assets, there is some kind of a cool-looking town place here. Or old ruin, and this does not look like architecture I really recognise from anywhere else in the game. It actually looks a bit Norny, you know, with like the rounded roofs. But this is cool. This is exotic. This is alien. This looks like a new place to explore and a new thing to do. And so yeah, we get a little tease of the map, and we get what appears to be new weapons. And this is cool. This also reminds me a little bit of going to Lake Doric, you know, and they had those cool like wooden houses there. Those were some new assets. So yeah. And back to the title, there's something leaving the water. I don't know. What does that mean, really? Anything? On behalf of ArenaNet, I want to express my sincere gratitude for the continued support, your passion, your feedback. It's not lost on us just how incredibly lucky we are to have such a dedicated community behind us, and we look forward to discovering more of Tyrria's secrets together with you for years to come. You know, whenever I read stuff like this, I always think, okay, imagine you're a grumpy, angry nerd that's not satisfied with the game and is thinking about not buying the next mini Expac. Are you really going to read this paragraph and think, okay, fine, I'll stay? Like, who is this greasing up? Who does this really appeal to? I suppose there's the odds that it's just truly sincere as well. Thanks for reading. I can't believe we're just 1 week away from announcing what's next for Guild Wars 2. I'm really excited for what we've created, and I think you will be too. And then they have this thing here, the year of content, and they're really just sort of pushing. Here's how much we did, you know, the festivals and stuff are all listed in there as well. You know, it's a good looking list. How satisfied we all were by each part of this list, you know, you guys can let me know down below. So there you go, that's their retrospective. Overall, I think this will be good to incite some excitement in people for the next Expac. It explains where things are going to be a little bit different. The proof will be in the pudding in terms of actually playing this thing and seeing how much better it really is. And, you know, next week, obviously, with those announcements is going to be a big part of that. So looking forward to that. Yeah, I would have preferred if this was toned a little bit more hardly, you know, if it had been a little bit more candid. If they'd been a little harder on themselves, where they you know, they say stuff like, oh, it was just a broader scope than was feasible. Well, let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. Let's talk a little bit more closely about it. But hey, it is something. So there you go, guys. That's the first little communication about the next Expac. So thanks very much for watching. As for the story streams, yes, they will be coming. Keep an eye out for them. I also feel quite bad. My other Let's Plays, I haven't really posted a video for a few days because I've been meaning to do Secret of the Obscure first. But, you know, that's probably not a good idea. So you can expect some of those projects to continue really quick. Maybe even, you know, 12 hours from now, I'll probably put the next one up. Thanks very much, guys. Let me know what you think down below. Keep an eye on the channel. Lots of fun stuff to come. And I'll be here very soon. Take care now, guys. And I'll see you next time.